Today we're talking about a legendary dragon that only appears once in 100 years. Yes, you heard it right, and its name is the Screaming Death. The most terrifying and mysterious dragon you guys have ever seen. In this video, we're going to explain everything you need to know about him. So let's start from its appearance. It's about 50 feet long and it has a snake-like body covered with rough white scales and bright red spikes on its head. This guy has bright red eyes, which makes it look very fierce and scary. Unlike some dragons that have big wings, the Screaming Death has small wings and uses its long tail to help it move around. Its face looks kind of scary because it has a huge mouth, filled with many rows of sharp teeth. Talking about its abilities, one of the coolest things is its firepower. Instead of just breathing fire, it can shoot many fireballs at once, like a dragon version of a fireworks show. These fireballs are not unlike that of the Night Fury, and similar to a mortar, but with a much higher rate of fire. Another cool thing is that it can also breathe rings of fire that match the round shape of its mouth. These are identical to the fire rings used by the Whispering Death. As you can see, the name is Screaming Death, so it can use its screaming power to control the dragons to some extent. We saw that in Dragon's Rise of Berk, the dragons that follow the Screaming Death are called exiles. These are dragons that lost their homes after the Screaming Death destroyed their islands, so they began to follow it instead. Even though the Screaming Death is extremely powerful, it's not the alpha among all dragons. Yes, because other bigger dragons, like the Bewilderbeast, can still control it. However, this guy can command its Whispering Death siblings. But this control has its limits, because the Screaming Death does not have the power over the parent Whispering Death, also known as the Broodmother. When the mother appears, it immediately stops commanding the others and gives up control. Like its cousin Whispering Death, the Screaming Death lives in dark places underground, like tunnels, caves, and mountains. It loves to tunnel through the earth, and when it does, it can cause entire islands to sink into the water. Now let's talk about how a Screaming Death is born. It's kind of interesting because it's formed by a mutation in Whispering Deaths that happens only once in 100 years. Legends say that only one Screaming Death can exist at a time. The story of Screaming Death begins when it was just an egg. He and his siblings were placed beneath Berk by the outcast tribe. They hoped the dragons would hatch underground and destroy Berk from below. Later, Savage and the other outcasts returned to Berk to check on the Whispering Death hatchlings. When they entered the caves beneath the village, they saw broken eggshells scattered across the floor, which showed that the dragons had already hatched. But there was something crazy. One shell stood out from the rest. It was red and far larger than any of the others. Savage quickly realized that something was very wrong. The hole in the cave ceiling, where the hatchling had burrowed out, was almost as large as the tunnel made by a full-grown Whispering Death. This was shocking because the dragon had only just been born. It became clear that this massive egg belonged to the Screaming Death. This scares the crap out of Savage and his men, so they fled the cave in fear. After that, there was a loud scream in the cave, which confirmed that the Screaming Death had already awoken. Within just a few weeks after hatching, the Screaming Death grew at an unbelievable speed. It changed from a hidden underground hatchling into a massive monster that could shake the ground of Berk. In the episode Tunnel Vision, the island shook harder than ever before. A huge white dragon burst out of the ground and attacked one of the riders. It tore through the village and destroyed everything in its path. Fishlegs told Hiccup that he had never seen a Boulder-class or Titan-winged dragon like this before. Hiccup and Toothless tried to get its attention by firing a plasma blast. The white dragon became furious and released a loud scream that confused nearby dragons. Toughnut gave the dragon its official name, which was the Screaming Death, and he seemed pretty proud of it. His excitement faded when many Whispering Deaths arrived to protect the Screaming Death. Hiccup ordered the riders to fight the Whispering Deaths while he dealt with the Screaming Death himself. The Screaming Death went on a violent rampage and frightened a Viking woman. Hiccup and Toothless saved her but were struck by the dragon's tail and crashed into the ground. The Screaming Death moved in to attack again. Stoic and Tornado arrived just in time and blasted the dragon. Hiccup and Toothless took flight again and tried to lead the Screaming Death out of the village. Stoic and Tornado followed close behind. At the same time, Astrid and Snotlout were being chased by a Whispering Death. They split up and Snotlout went another way. The Whispering Death followed Astrid and Stormfly. They tried to escape through the forest. Hookfang bent a tree and waited silently. When Astrid flew past, Hookfang released the tree and slammed the Whispering Death, and it fled in fear. Nearby, Fishlegs and Meatlug waited for their chance. The Whispering Death attacked them, but Meatlug blasted it with gas. The dragon became angry, but Meatlug struck it with her tail and sent it flying into the ocean. Back on Berk, Hiccup tried to stop the Screaming Death by using the weakness of the Whispering Deaths, which is sunlight. The Screaming Death dug under the ground for a moment. It returned even angrier and burst out between Stoic and Hiccup. The sunlight was still shining on it. The Screaming Death screamed again and confused Toothless and Tornado. Toothless fired a plasma blast to silence it. The Screaming Death chased Hiccup and Toothless toward the sea. Stoic tried to help, but was blocked by a Whispering Death, so he drove it away with a sonic blast. When the Whispering Death hit the ground, the twins blasted it. Stoic ordered them to find Hiccup and help him. Hiccup shed light on the Screaming Death again and learned the truth. The dragon was not afraid of sunlight, and it was drawn to it. Hiccup used this to his advantage, and led the Screaming Death toward the sea stacks. The riders followed from behind. Astrid and Stormfly caught up to Hiccup and Toothless. They split apart, but the Screaming Death forced Hiccup and Toothless to land. The riders attacked to protect Hiccup, but the Screaming Death fired many fireballs and pushed them back. Hiccup used his shield to reflect sunlight and keep the dragon focused on him. They flew through the narrow sea stacks while the Screaming Death smashed through rock pillars as it followed. Hiccup realized the dragon's size could be used against it. He stopped near a tall pillar and waited. The Screaming Death charged forward, but Hiccup and Toothless flew upward at the last moment. The Screaming Death slammed into the pillar with great force and was finally stopped. The pillar began to collapse, and giant rocks fell onto the Screaming Death's wings. Its wings were badly injured and it could no longer fly well. It screamed for help, and the other Whispering Deaths rushed to it. The Screaming Death tried to escape, but failed and fell down the cliff onto a lower platform. The riders watched as the Whispering Deaths lifted their leader and carried it away. Toothless wanted to finish the fight, but Hiccup chose to let them go. The Screaming Death and its siblings flew off to find a new home. Hiccup worried that the dragons might return because the Whispering Deaths were very protective of their birthplace. Since the Screaming Death is a special kind of Whispering Death, it might come back one day. In the episode Appetite for Destruction, the Screaming Death returned, and it had grown larger and smarter. It began destroying islands where other dragons lived. Entire islands sank into the sea and other dragons were forced to flee. The Screaming Death then moved toward Dragon Island. Hiccup tried to distract it using the light of his shield, and it followed the light for a moment but then ignored it. He shone the light in its eye, but the Screaming Death had learned from before. It struck Hiccup and Toothless with its tail and kept flying. Astrid and Stormfly attacked it with fireballs. Fishlegs arrived with wild gronkles whose island had been destroyed. They attacked the Screaming Death again, but it dug into the island to escape. Hiccup followed the Screaming Death underground and learned it was trying to sink the island from below. Hiccup and Toothless lured it back to the surface. Many riders and wild dragons whose homes were destroyed attacked at him together. The Screaming Death was outnumbered and forced to retreat. Seeing this, Hiccup told everyone the good news that the Screaming Death is born only once every 100 years. The bad news is that it was still alive and could return someday. In the episode Cast Out Part 1, the Screaming Death attacked Snotlout and Hookfang. It nearly killed Snotlout until Alvin saved him. Later, the dragon was seen bursting out of a sea stack. In Cast Out Part 2, Fishlegs found the Screaming Death while on patrol with Meatlug. There, Hiccup learned that the dragon was destroying islands because it was searching for its mother, so he sent a message back to the Academy. Fishlegs used Dragon Root to lure the Screaming Death to Outcast Island. The dragon almost ate Fishlegs, but he escaped. As the Berserker training area collapsed, the Screaming Death saw its mother. When Dagger captured her, the Screaming Death continued attacking, but when she was freed, the Screaming Death stopped fighting. Its mother and siblings flew to meet it, and the Screaming Death gave one final roar toward Hiccup and left with his family. Years later, after the war with Dagger, the Screaming Death and its family settled on their own island. Hiccup and Snotlout traveled there to collect shed scales to protect their dragons from dragon hunters. The Screaming Death tried to chase them away, until its mother stopped it. In the episode King of Dragons Part 2, the Screaming Death answered the call of the Berserker Bewilderbeast, and fought together with other dragons. It represented the Whispering Deaths, since they cannot appear in sunlight. So that's a wrap of the story of the Screaming Death. We know that there are many other legendary dragons, like the Red Death and the Bewilderbeast, in the How to Train Your Dragon world. But the Screaming Death will always be one of the most dangerous and memorable dragons ever faced by the writers. If you guys want us to make more videos on the stories of other dragons, let us know in the comments. See you next time. Bye!